You know, delivering excellence is more than just 18 wheels moving products around the country. Trucking is complex, and its people are passionate. Accommodating a diverse driving workforce, ever-changing regulations, supply chain demands, and new technologies all present their own challenges, but in trucking, the creative and the innovative succeed. Let's understand the people that drive and support the trucking industry, and welcome to Garner Trucking's Beyond the Cab. Hello and welcome to another edition of Beyond the Cab. I am absolutely honored and amazed. This is a landmark day for me because we've got a guest that is actually coming from the Great White North. Her name is Jane Jazwary. She is co-founder.
You got it.
I did it in the first shot.
Isn't
that amazing?
Awesome.
It's funny because as you look at the spelling of Jane's name, I think your brain makes it harder than it needs to be. I think that's what it boils down to.
There's a Z, there's a W, there's a Y,
yeah, it's all the end of the alphabet.
That goes no.
Well, Jane is co-founder of Carrier's Edge in Newmarket, Ontario. And if you're not familiar with that name, most in trucking will be familiar with one of their programs called The Best Fleets to Drive For. And Jane, I'm so thankful that you're here and spending some time with me today. I've got tons of questions for you, and I really want to kind of get inside the Best Fleets program. But first and foremost, I want to understand Carrier's Edge. And that's that particular business started in 2005, correct?
Carrier's Edge did. We have my partner Mark Morell and I actually started the company, the real company. There's a real company in 2000, and it's actually called Cranial Expansion Learning Solutions. If you can believe.
Okay.
That is the name of our company. Carrier's Edge was kind of in 2005, we decided to, let me go back a little bit. Cranial Expansion was a consulting company. So we did e-learning consulting. So we would create courses for anybody who would give us money, basically.
Okay.
So we would sell our services to banks and insurance, got a lot of white-collar companies, and they would tell us what courses they wanted, and we would build them. And this was something that we had done through PricewaterhouseCoopers beforehand. So we had been building e-learning at different companies for a while. And then what we did in around 2005, we decided that we didn't want to do it for white collar anymore because there were so many different companies doing the same thing, and we don't like doing the same thing that everybody else is doing. What we decided to do was look around for some kind of industry that needed e-learning and wasn't going to get it. So in 2005, trucking was definitely in need of some online learning, but they definitely didn't have it. We were also looking at the tourism industry and the early childhood education industry, where they may not have the money to do custom stuff, but we would do kind of more generic titles. And we eventually landed on trucking, and the first one, the first course that we did was actually a Canadian course. There's an American version. It's the Canadian version of hazmat. So in Canada, it's called Transportation of Dangerous Goods. And it's pretty much the same as hazmat. It's just we have slightly different rules. So that was our first course that we did, and I think we finished it in 2006, and that was kind of where it started.
Okay, awesome. I think that it's really interesting in the first place that you zeroed in on trucking, and especially when you're talking about 2005, and I'm trying to think about the technology and our capabilities at that time for that online learning piece. From then to where we are now, I think trucking's finally caught up in terms of tech and really found the value in it. But it is kind of an interesting thing. In
2005, it was a lot. It was so we did it because we knew someone in trucking who said, you know what, people in trucking, companies in trucking could really use this. So you should do it for trucking. And we're like, okay. That sounds
okay,
fine.
well, let's get started. Well,
sure. Like, that's how entrepreneurs kind of do it. It's like, okay, we'll do that.
Well, I think there's a real passion. It certainly comes from both you and Mark when it comes to the trucking industry, and really kind of feeds us into that Best Fleets program. I have a start date of that for 2008, correct?
Right. So we started in trucking, and like the first thing that we had to get over, the first hurdle that we had to get over is drivers can't use computers. So I cannot tell you how many times that we heard that. And so we didn't believe that because, you know, we weren't creating a very difficult product. So we did some stuff around that. But between 2005 and 2008, what was happening is because I was the person writing most of the courses, and also not being in public because I was really worried about being a woman in trucking and writing courses that I don't have necessarily the subject matter expertise for. So my job before trucking was to do just that, was to get as much information as possible about a topic and write about it and create a course for it, whether I knew anything about it or not. I did this for years. And so when I did it for trucking, I knew how to do it and I was doing it, but we were really worried about that whole idea of, one, I'm a woman, two, I'm writing about I'm not a driver. So how can I be doing this? And if you know anything about this particular industry, you don't actually have to know about it. What you have to be able to do is research. And what I was doing, I was reading everything that I could get my hands on in that time. I still do, but I was reading like all the industry magazines, I was reading regulations, I was reading all kinds of stuff. And what I really came away with was that everybody was really unhappy. Like, I know they are now, but they were pretty unhappy in that time frame too. And all the drivers were saying they were no good carriers, and all the carriers were saying they were no good drivers. So everybody is really annoyed with each other.
Everybody's unhappy.
Yeah, everybody's unhappy, and everybody's saying there's just no solutions, there's just no good drivers, we can't do anything, it's like a horrible fail. And so I was also reading Fortune, because I read a lot, obviously, as you might be able to guess. I read way too much. And so I'm reading this Fortune magazine, and was it Fortune? Yeah, it was, because they were talking about the 100 best companies to work for. So I'm reading this because there's a subscription line around my house, so I picked it up and I'm reading it, and I'm looking through it, and I'm going, hey, wait a minute, there's no trucking companies on this Best 100. And I started looking into it and realized there are no trucking companies on any, there was no trucking companies on any list. There was no best company list that, I think Yellow, well, it's not Yellow anymore, but back in the day it was called Yellow.
Yeah, that would track.
Yeah, YRC it's now.
Yep. And
they were on one, had been 5 years, maybe 2000 they'd been on one. So I went into Mark's office and said that there should be one. But, why aren't they on, why aren't any trucking companies on any list? This doesn't make sense. If they want good people, then they should get on a list. And there was a lot more ranting about that. I tend to have these ideas and go on and on and on about it. And so that was how it was born. We just we wanted to use education to help companies be better. And we knew that companies, if they just look at what they're doing, if they just have this sort of self-awareness, and sort of look at what other people are doing as well, then you can get better, because that's what the rest of the world is doing. So yeah, I thought it would be really, we kind of thought that it would be good for trucking to do it as well, and it's kind of worked out that way.
I think it's very effective and interesting that was kind of the goal, because it's the first, after a few years of participating in the program, it's kind of one of the first epiphanies that I had about kind of our approach to the whole program, and more importantly, park the program for a second, more importantly, what we're doing as an organization and what we're able to contribute to, better life and better conditions for our drivers. And that's the thing that stood out to me, is that year after year, okay, we're frankly, we're chasing ourselves here. We're trying to improve ourselves, the total business and the total atmosphere of how we do business. And as you go through that program, I think it's very effective, and you certainly hit the mark with that. So because of the fact that we started this process in 2008, and here we are in 2022, and we're getting ready at the end of the month here to see you again in Las Vegas, and always excited to find out who's going to be the top dogs. What for you guys keeps this interesting? What, in the contest, what keeps it interesting for you guys after this long a time?
Okay, two things. And so one of them is one of the interesting things is anytime we see something new, somebody's done something completely different. We usually really like that. And that's kind of, that's like the CCJ innovators, and that there's a lot of programs that say, hey, you're doing something cool, and they'll get an award, or they get recognized. And Best Fleets is no different. We do the same thing. But what I honestly really find interesting is what people don't do. And there are huge gaps that we see every year. I think a couple of years ago, it was cybersecurity. That we started looking at, our companies. There's all these hacks happening, all of these ransomware, and how many companies are actually doing something, and so many weren't. So we, I found that fascinating. Like, why aren't you? Like, that's a huge problem.
Right.
Why aren't you doing anything? And there's not you specifically, Gartner. Like, I'm just talking about the general you, or things about trying to bring more women into the industry. So we've asked for years about, how many women drivers do you have, and how do you try and bring people into the industry, or how to bring women or other types of diversity into the industry. And I always find it fascinating how many people say nothing, basically nothing. And sometimes they couch it in, they say, we don't have to, or that it's wrong. It's wrong to even think that. You can't bring diversity into, you can't talk about diversity that way, because for some reason it's like you I don't know, it's like you're trying to single people out, or you're trying to do affirmative action or whatever. But I don't see it that way. I see it as you have people who are traditionally in the industry and people who are not. So what we're trying to ask is, okay, so you are running out of the traditional people, so what are you going to do? And how are you going to attract people?
Right.
And when you just refuse to even think about it, that's a problem, because you're not going to solve the problem that you have by saying, it's not a problem, we accept everybody. Sure, I bet you accept everybody, but are you attracting people? Like, how are you doing that? Because that's a totally different thing.
That's another really interesting point too. Several years back, there was a gentleman that titles himself as a demographer, and I've seen this gentleman speak a couple of times. But I was at an industry event many years ago, and the first thing he did is walk out on stage, and his first words were, looking at the crowd, "I can tell you that as an industry, you guys are in trouble." Because it's basically a bunch of, older white males that was in this audience. And thankfully, we're starting to see that change over the years. But I think it lends to your point. We as an industry have to change our wiring and how we look at things, because if you don't attract those individuals, the same thing as just simply attracting a driver. If people don't know that this is an industry that has an entire career path. People, for the most part, if they're looking at driving truck, they're stumbling into the industry because of some other industry that's failed them or something that's gone awry in their lives. And that's, and I will tell you very honestly, at 25 years of age, that's what happened with me. It's like, okay, I've got a family of 4, and we're struggling, and I've got to do something that's going to financially benefit my family. And thankfully, trucking was a great option. I'm so happy, 25 years later that I made that choice. But there's a whole slew of opportunity out there, and if we don't appeal to all of those different people, whether it's male, female, this is an industry that is not gender specific or race specific. Anyone can play this game, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. My biggest concern, and this is one of these short-term, long-term problems. In the short term, you kind of want to get anybody you can. In the long term, you have to have a better strategy. And this is what I see with the successful best fleets, is that they don't just try and get on the list. They are looking at longer-term strategies. So if you are thinking, okay, I have no women drivers, I have one woman in my office that, basically does books and gets coffee, that's a big problem. There's two problems. One, why would a woman want to drive for you? And two, where are the women in the office who could be a support or even give you any idea of how to attract another woman? Or if everybody is white, how do you think about attracting someone who's not? Because people go to where they see themselves. So you see women are going to go to women-oriented industries. And you said that you were struggling and then you ended up going into the trucking industry. Well, when I was struggling when I was younger, I didn't have any kids, but I became a receptionist. Mm-hmm. So there you go. Like, you did the man thing and I did the woman thing. And that's what you do. So you have to try and figure out how are we going to change the outlook. It's difficult.
And it is. You're talking about years and years of this is the way we've always done it, which is, mine and certainly our owner's least favorite saying ever. What would you say that the Best Fleets program, what's the ultimate goal? What do you see as kind of the pinnacle of success for that program?
For our program or for people in the program?
I want us to just say yes.
Oh, that's good. So for the program, and you probably know this, but for anybody listening, this is not a profit center for us. We're not doing it because we are trying to sell something to you. We do have something to sell, but we generally don't talk about it at the same time as we talk about Best Fleets. That's like a separate conversation all the time.
I'll validate that, Jane. I'll validate that. You and I have we've had many conversations with Mark as well, and never once have we talked about Best Fleets and the offerings of Carrier's Edge in the same conversation.
Oh, good. Yeah, and you're not a customer, so it's fine. It doesn't matter. You don't need to be a TCA member. You just need to want to see how you're doing. And it's a process. It's not a prize. Well, it is a prize. There is a prize involved, but the process of getting through that whole, the evaluation part of it is really the value of the entire program. And what I would like to see for the program is more trucking companies participating. And what I would really like to do is eventually have something where you can use it as an evaluation tool without worrying about getting an award. Or to be something where you can use it as a kind of way to make your company better.
It's your measuring stick.
Mm-hmm. Like a measuring stick, but also like a plan for how to improve on different things.
Yeah.
We have a lot of information about how people have improved, so we know where the wins are. And we try to talk about it as much as we can.
Sure. What so we talked a little bit about the diversity in the industry, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but if there was one thing to change in the trucking industry for you, what would that be, or what would you like to see?
You think I'm going to say more women, right?
I have no idea. I would not be that presumptuous.
Oh well, if anybody is aware of me at all, you know that I do tend to talk about it quite a bit. It's because I'm a short woman that has had issues with fitting in to male-dominated workplaces, which is what I have done my entire career, is that I have gone into male-dominated workplaces, and sometimes I completely fail, sometimes I do well, but generally I kind of do my own thing a lot of the time, and so it's better that I work for myself. I'm not someone who does well with a boss.
I
have a lot of very strange ideas, and people who are trying to run a company are like, yes, you have lots of ideas, but let's not go there. So anyway, what I would like to see in the trucking industry is, and it's a weird kind of thing, is I would like a little bit more looking into the future without worrying about freight. The way that people look into the future, or the way that company owners look into the future, it often is about freight and about how much money can be made in a certain lane or whatever, or what your operating ratio is, all that money stuff. I would like for the industry to start looking at the future in regards to other things. So I don't know what that is, but I know cybersecurity is a good one. What's going to happen in 5 years with cybersecurity? Like, what is the state? Like, right now, so many companies are getting hit with ransomware. What's going to happen in 5 years? What's going to happen in 10 years? What about bringing in diversity to the industry? What's it going to look like in 10 years? How can we maximize what trucking is going to be in 10 years? Everybody is always talking about autonomous vehicles. Okay, so if we have autonomous vehicles, what does that look like? And people are always really worried about it, but they're not really embracing it as a thought process. Like, picture yourself in 10 years and there's autonomous vehicles. Then what? And it's an exciting thing. It's not a tragic thing.
Right. Well, and I agree with that today, just from the sake of safety in the equipment that's out on the road. If you're buying a newer piece of equipment, there's so much tech in there that is, I guess, quote unquote, automated, that helps a driver, assists a driver. At the end of the day, we're all human, and we still have room for error. And so that automation, to me, I agree with you. I embrace that because I think it steps forward towards a safer environment for the motoring public, and it's a safe environment for our driver, and then ultimately for their families that they're trying to get home to each and every week. So, yeah, I agree with that. I think the automation piece is a really cool thing that's going on in our industry. I have to, I would debate, the full autonomy and how far along or how far away that is. I think that's maybe a question that I'm not smart enough to answer, but I see the value, definitely see the value, and I agree with you. The diversity is another trick altogether, and maybe trick's the wrong word, but especially when you start talking about a company like a Garner, and I draw from our own examples just because of where we are. We're pretty much in rural Ohio, so a lot of folks look and act the same and think the same way. And the fortune for us is that we're able to hire out of communities that we are passing through, that we're driving through, that we have frequency, so that we can reach that Toledo market, that Detroit market, that Cleveland market and find some diversity through that. And I think it's really benefited us over the years. But for a trucking company that this kind of pigeonholed in a specific area with a specific dynamic or geographic location that limits their ability to be able to hire diversity, it's got to be challenging. It has to be.
Yeah, everybody is always talking about the challenge of diversity, especially, but they're also only thinking about that in terms of race or color, and everybody is the same, but they're actually not. There's a lot of diversity. Excuse me. There's a lot of diversity outside of what you look like. There's a lot of there's a lot of varying disabilities. So you may be hearing impaired, but you can still drive. But that is not going to be, you're not going to be finding people who are hearing impaired necessarily through the same channels you use to get everybody else. Maybe you need to go to partner with some of the government organizations or chambers of commerce, that kind of thing, and find some ways to get to that population, or people who are on the autism spectrum who make amazing drivers if they want to be. And that is a group of people who may be in your community, but you don't know about it. And when you partner with organizations who help those people get a job, then you open yourself up. It's just, I always call it failure of imagination. Problems can be solved with imagination, and if you choose to just not solve it because it's too hard, that's a failure of imagination. Imagine what it would be like if you had all of these different kinds of people, and then the steps to get there actually kind of present themselves. See, this is why I don't do well with bosses. I'm weird this way.
Well, no, but I think it proves a point. And I think a great set of examples in that. I can speak again culturally for Garner. Several years ago, we had hired our first hearing impaired driver. Did an outstanding job for us. It attracted a second. And through that process, then we learn to be better communicators. So as we get video out of events or things that we have going on, or educational pieces, or things like our simple little podcast here, all that stuff gets closed captioned so that they can participate with that. And we wouldn't have done that if there wasn't the need. And so I think, it helps you grow as an organization and take a look at things differently. And then certainly the outreach of that lends to itself to find other opportunities to bring more individuals in that may be hearing impaired, or some of the examples you were giving I think are spot on. I appreciate that thought process quite a bit.
There was one thing that I wanted to say about, well, you're talking about technology, and this is something that I think is really important for carriers to realize, is that you can't dump technology on people. And this is kind of what the industry has been doing. And this is why I say, have a longer term vision. If you want to have, talk about ELDs. ELDs are they're all done now. Everybody has them. But for a number of years, we knew they were coming, and there was only certain companies who did anything. There was a lot of companies who would not do a thing until the very last minute. That is such punishment for your drivers.
Yeah.
That's terrible. Don't dump it on them and make people try and figure it out for themselves. Come on.
Yeah, you're just throwing somebody into the water without a life raft at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was another thing that you asked me earlier about, the things that surprised me. That was another thing. It was like, why? It's not, get some ELDs like the year before they say they're going to come out. Like, start it, please.
Yeah, you got. Well, I will tell you, this kind of hit me sideways. I took a phone call just about a month ago from a pretty well-respected organization that operates trucks, And the question was, what are you doing with your ELD provider with the onset of the 3G sundown?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm looking at the calendar and I'm thinking, you're asking this question now, and you've got less than a month to figure it out, including replacing your current ELD carrier. That'll make you panic a little bit, but to your point, yeah, this is it becomes a struggle then, because now whatever might have happened, they're going to impose that on their drivers, this new technology or new way of doing things, and it's going to be instant. It's going to be rip the Band-Aid off and okay, you have to do this now. So. And
that's so unfair. I just find that incredibly unfair. Like, part of my job before I was in trucking was training people on new technology, and people hate change like that. You can't, that's how you get people to quit. I mean, that's such a recipe for, if I wanted someone to quit working for my company, I would impose sudden change. I would make it very difficult to succeed, and I would punish people for not doing the right thing. And guess what? Everybody leaves.
Yep. And yeah, that's a very effective set of methods to get someone to run away. What would you say to someone who's interested in the industry or getting into trucking? What would be your advice to them?
It would depend on what they wanted to do.
Well, let's say a driver.
Okay, so for a driver, it would depend on if it was a man or a woman. I actually, and actually, no, this doesn't matter if gender doesn't really matter, but figure out the questions. Figure out the questions that you need to ask a future employer that don't have anything to do with money. Like, think about what you need and what you're willing to give up and what you're not willing to give up, and find that out before you worry about cents per mile and things like that, because people miss the things that they really care about, like how much do you really need to be home, or what are the supports what happens if I get into a collision? Like, what happens? How am I supported, or am I just going to get into trouble? What kind of education programs do you have? Will you explain to me, explaining people's paychecks, things like that? If you have a complicated pay system and nobody's going to explain it to you, then I would steer clear of a company like that. I would also want to talk to people who are currently in the industry about what their days are like. One of the things that I think is really, really valuable is to, especially for entry-level people, is to, basically just do a ride-along. Like, don't even worry about driving the truck. Just be there for a while and see what it's like.
Truth from drivers. That's what you're talking about. Truth from drivers. You get a real honest depiction of a company, I think, after speaking to a few, or if you're fortunate enough to be able to do a ride-along. I agree with that.
Oh, yeah. And, I mean, we get so much really good information from drivers. Like, as you know, you do the questionnaire, and then we get the drivers or you ask your drivers to do surveys. And, you can see where and it's not necessarily the ratings, it's the comments. Like, sometimes you see comments and you're like, ooh, there's something going on there.
What's the worst comment you've ever seen?
I think it was a company, and I knew who the company was. Well, I know who the companies are because it's attached. But it was something about some sort of abuse that was happening at one of their terminals. And we couldn't say anything to the carrier until afterwards, but there was a couple of comments, and that really concerns me, because if you're doing it on your best fleet survey, then nobody else has listened to you.
Yeah.
Like, that is, like, your best fleet survey is not supposed to be the place where you you can, but it's not. My hope is that it's already been taken care of by the company.
Well, you wouldn't want any surprises to show up on that questionnaire.
No, I don't think carriers want any surprises.
No, not at
and
all.
usually it's very common comments about like the things that drivers don't like. There's, pay is one of them. Pay is one of the things that people comment most negatively about and also most positively about.
Sure.
It's really quite funny. It's like it's in the top two for both negative and positive. But it's also communication is a huge one. So if you have bad communication, in the negative comments, it's the company doesn't communicate at all, or terrible communication. Or on the positive side, you feel like family. So that's the two sides of the coin. And then it's kind of equipment and, just more general. But pay and communication.
Those are the big ones.
All the time. All the time.
Well, I don't know if you're prepared to reveal any of this yet, but I'm going to ask the question. So every year there's always some differences, some changes that happen from year to year on the Best Fleets program, some different focuses and things like that. Are you prepared, or can you reveal anything that you're thinking about for 2023 in the Best Fleets program?
Oh, man. Well, we had such big changes this year because we introduced the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, very cool, by the way. I like that a lot.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad. Basically, if you've been on the list for too many years, we're going to turf you into the Hall of Fame.
You know what, though?
Your punishment.
I mean, at that point, I really, if you've been on that list for 10 years running, that's just an amazing achievement, and they deserve that recognition.
Oh,
I love the fact that I'm stacked against 10 other carriers in our size bracket, and you really get a chance to measure up and see what those companies are built of, the same way that they're looking at us. And when you get to that stature of 10 years, I mean, that's an amazing feat, and you can't say anything negative about those companies that achieve that. So I think it's really cool that you've decided to put that in play and make a feature for those carriers that are exemplary.
Well, we have been talking about it for a long time about how we can, there's these fleets who are just operating at a higher level than everybody, who are those staples, who are on the list every single year. And so they want to be in, like everybody wants to be in it. They don't, like, those fleets want to do this. And they use it, and I think Gartner uses the Best Fleets data as a way to plan what you're doing for the next year, which we love. It's funny because we just ask you questions. You all do with that information, do you do whatever it is that you want to do? And it's literally, we don't tell you anything, we just ask you. And that just, for fleets that do really, really well, they're taking that they're looking at themselves and then they're figuring out what they want to do, and I love that. So we really were struggling with that. So the Hall of Fame it presented itself, and it really worked out. It also allows other fleets who have been doing really well in the program to actually come into the top 20. We have had fleets who are like so close so many times, and now we have this totally different top 20, and we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it's cool. It's very cool. Jane, I can't thank you enough for your time today, especially on the onset. We're just a few weeks away from the big stage and the Best Fleets Awards that are going to happen this year at the TCA convention in Las Vegas. And always excited to see both you and Mark, and looking forward to the experience. And again, can't thank you enough for your time today. I want to allow one more thing for you in case you need to do it. This is the part where you can plug something shamelessly if you'd like.
Oh, man. Can it be anything?
Absolutely.
Okay, here's my favorite TV show, and no one will like this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm just going to shamelessly plug it. I'm not even shamelessly plugging my company. Okay, so I call this show The Vampires, but it's What We Do in the Shadows. And it is hilarious.
Okay.
What We Do in the Shadows. It's 4 vampires who are living on Staten Island.
Okay. It's a comedy.
Comedy news. Oh yeah, it's not. It's one of the only shows that I can watch reruns of. Like, I can watch it over and over again, and I will still laugh. Like, most of the time, comedies I won't watch more than once. But this one is hilarious.
You can just find your way through.
Well, anybody's
I appreciate
looking.
that.
Yeah.
Everybody needs a binge watch. Everybody needs to binge watch something. So, so that's.
And hey, it's like it's the big question of the pandemic, right? What are you watching?
Yeah, what are you watching? Exactly. What are you seeing?
I like vampires.
Well, Jane Jazwary, I really appreciate you taking the time today, co-founder of Carrier's Edge up there in beautiful Ontario. Thanks again, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thanks very much.
All right, you've just witnessed another edition of Beyond the Cab.